Welcome to my first YouTube video, my first tutorial. So today we'll be building an app that uses Redux to try and understand how Redux works. The reason I decided to do Redux as my first video is because Redux is the one thing that I kind of struggled with so much when I started my React Native journey. So this is a blank project that we've just run React Native init and project name to set up our files and folder structure here. So after when you run that, you just give it some time for npm to install the necessary packages, and then you can just cd into the directory that you just created. And then right now we just want to run React Native, run iOS to see how our project looks in our emulator before we start editing anything. So we'll give it some time for emulator to power on, and then from there we can do now the necessary. The default screen that we get when our simulator powers on, and the content of that screen is what is available inside the app.js file. So you want to build ourselves a new file that will display the content we have. So the best way is to maybe create our own folder, and then inside that folder maybe we can do something like counter.js. So from our counter.js, that is where we can first test we can first make sure that we're linking the content correctly. So what we need to do is we need to import we need to import everything inside here. We need to import the file we just created to the app.js file. So import counter from src counter, and then from there you can say const app equals to, it takes in props, and then what we need to return is the counter, and then we need to export default app. Yeah, so you can see that we're now correctly calling the counter file, which is what is saying counter in our main file. So we can now go ahead and do what we want to do. We can import a button, and then we can, from there we can now create our counter. So button is a self-closing that takes in a title, so we can call this one add, and then we can have another one here, another button that is self-closing, and then you can call it subtract. So you can see, and then the value of the counter should be somewhere here. So maybe we can just work with that one for now. So without using Redux first, let's see how we do it without Redux. So we would need use state hook, and then from our use state hook, what we need to do is let me just fix something here. For this we need to return, yes. So using the use state we just imported, we need to create new states that will hold our counter value. So we need to say const counter and set counter. That will use state, and then it will take an initial state of 0. So if we were to dynamically call the value here, we'll just call the counter, and as you can see it's 0. So now we want to now make sure that when we click the buttons, the value is actually increasing or decreasing. So we need to set two functions, value of the counter from the state. We need to now configure our buttons to work so that when you press add, the value of the counter increases by 1, and the same for the subtraction one. So what we need to do is we need to build two functions. So I'll call mine an addition handler that takes in no parameter, and when the function is executed, what you want to do is you want to set the counter to the value of counter at that time plus 1. And then this function we need to tie it to the on press property of the add button. So we need to build a function that points to the addition handler. So you can see that when you click on it, the counter is now increasing by 1, and maybe you can also do away with the double brackets as of now, and it should still work. So what we now need to do is we need to go and set the subtraction one, which is, we'll call it subtraction handler. And then when the function is called, what you want to do is we want to set the counter into counter minus 1. If you're familiar with JavaScript, you can also call it as counter minus minus. So I'll just work with counter minus 1 for mine. And then we need to tie it to the onPress property of our subtraction button. So we'll call it subtraction handler, and then you can see when you now click on it, the value of the counter is reducing by 1. So that is how we would achieve our application that increases or decreases the value of our counter without Redux. Now let us see how we would achieve the same effect using Redux. So for Redux, the first things that we need to do is we need to do an installation of the Redux library itself. So it should be npm install Redux, and now a package called React Redux that binds the Redux to our application. So you can go ahead and type that and then click enter, and then we'll be back when the installation completes. So make sure to also check out the official Redux documentation. I'll leave the link below. So we can see that we've installed the two packages, and what we now need to do is we need to create something called a store, and then things called an action creators. So let's first start by explaining how Redux will work by setting up the files and folder structures. So inside the folder called src, we'll now create a new folder called store. So inside our store is where we'll have what we call action types. These are just basically variables that describe what you want to do. So for Redux to work, we need to have what we call a store. So I'll create it there still. Store is where the state will be managed. And another thing we need to have is what we call action creators. So actions.js, and then another thing we need is what we call reducers.js. So I know my tutorial will be a bit shallow. It was sort of a resource for me to reference in future, but you can always check out the official documentation by Redux. So the first thing we need to do is we need to build our constants that describe the actions that we want to do. So for example, we want to have an addition property. I mean, we want, when we click on our addition button, the action that is dispatched is what is called addition. So similar to subtraction, what we need to do is we need to do that, and then the two actions that describe what we want to do, we now need to import them in our actions file. So we can say from action types, what we need to do is we need to import addition and subtraction, and then the next thing we need to do is we need to build what we call action creators. Basically, they are just functions that point to this, so that when this is called, whether it's addition or subtraction, our reducers knows how to modify the state. So we can just say let's say a function called addition, and then that will take in nothing, and then what we want is we want to return the type addition. So you want, when this function is called, the object that is returned is the addition, and then Redux will understand and send these actions to our reducer, and the reducer will modify our state accordingly. So the other one is subtraction, and what you want to do is the same as above. We want to return subtraction. Now these are just objects, action creators. They sort of create an action. So now where state is being modified is in our reducers file. So in our reducers file, we need to also import the action types we just created, which is action types. We need to import addition and subtraction, and then what we first need to do is we need to build our initial state. So let's call it initial state. So this is how our state looks like. So in place where we had the counter value being initialized by 0, we need to initialize here by 0 again, and then we can confirm that the value is being passed. We can confirm it later on. So we need to now describe how our state will be modified when either addition or subtraction is called. So what first we need to do is we need to build something called a reducer. So export const, let's call it main reducer. So it takes in two arguments. One is state, which will take in default, a default parameter of initial state, and then the other one is action. And then what happens is we need to now have a switch statement that is dependent on the action dot type. So what we need here is we need to say that when addition is triggered, what do we want to do when addition is triggered? When addition is triggered, what we want to do is we need to return a copy of the state. Sorry for my typos. A copy of the state, and then the counter property is what we're changing. So the value of the counter, we need to increase it by 1. So what we can say is state dot counter, which will be pointing to this. Excuse me. The state dot counter, which will be pointing to this here, and then plus 1. Excuse me. Now the other thing we need to do is we need to have a case for subtraction. So what we want to do when subtraction is called is we need to return a copy of the state, and then the value of the counter changes by -1, so state.counter -1. And then when for Redux we need to pass in a default return state, so that when nothing similar to this happens, what we need to know is we need to return just state as it was. Now task that we need to do is we need to now go to our store and create the actual store that the components or the reducers will be fetching its data from. So we need to import something from Redux, and that something is called create store. And then we also need to import the reducer we just created from reducers. So the package we just created, it's called main reducer, and then from that we can now just create our store using create store into the reducer. So the reducer is the one that is responsible for modifying the state according to the action. If it's addition, it's increasing it by 1. If it's subtraction, it's changing the value by -1. So now that our store is ready, we need to import it to our app, so that the store is available throughout our application. So I need to import. What I like doing is I go to the package itself first, so that my imports will be easier that way. So what I know is I need to import store, and then I also need to import a module called provider from React Redux. Remember, React Redux is what is binding our application to use Redux. So if you just type provider, you'll see it there. And then I like grouping my files and libraries differently. So now, in order for our store to be available throughout our app, what we need to do is we need to wrap the counter into our provider, and when we do it this way, the state is not yet available, so what we need to pass in is our store this way. So now our store is available throughout the app, and then we can now modify our state according to how we want. So if we go to the file here called counter, remember this is what we had without Redux before. So what we can now do is we can do away with all these functions here. We can do away with that. We can do away with these and these, and now we just want to use Redux to achieve the same functionality as before. So we don't even need the useState hook, and then what we now need to do is we import a few modules from React Redux, and those are use selector and what we call use dispatch. So use selector is what will enable us get the state. So we can say maybe something like count data is equal to use selector, and then selector has access to state, and then from state what we now want to do is we want to say what state dot now what do we want to get? We want to get if we go to our reducer, if we want to get the counter, we can say state dot counter. So from our file counter.js, we can say go to state dot counter, and then now if I pass in here data, it should now be available. So another thing that we need to fix is we need to fix the functions that are pointing to empty functions. So you just need to say we first need to call dispatch. Use dispatch. Now what we want to do is we want to import the functions, the object creators, that these ones we want to import addition and subtraction. So you can say import from store and actions. What we want to import is we want to import addition and subtraction. Now this is what we'll now be using dispatch. These are the actions that we'll be dispatching, and the way to do that is we now need to just say we want a function that pointing to the dispatch that we just created here. So dispatch into, we want to dispatch an addition. So when this button is pressed, we want to dispatch addition, and then similar to this, when this button is created, we want to dispatch when this button is pressed, we want to dispatch subtraction. Now if you were to click now addition, you can see that it's changing. Let me just confirm the error, quick fix, and then let me just fix a few errors on my lint. Okay, so we can see that we are calling the counter from Redux, and we can see that when we actually press addition, the counter is changing, and if we press subtraction, the counter is changing. All of this is we're getting it from Redux, which has the state, access to state. So if you want to do this in a more elegant way, what we can do is we can use something called destructuring, and then you can say here const counter should come from the data, and then we can just call this counter. So this is a more elegant way to do things, because we're calling the whole state, and then from the state object we can now destructure what we're interested in. If it's counter, remember if we had something else, like name that has a property of let's say me, of course, Cherukol. If I want access to this from my page over there, what I'll say is I'll destructure name also, and then I can have a similar thing and then just call it name. So that is a more elegant way to do things, and then using Redux. So you can see that you can add, you can subtract. If you have any questions or comments, we can leave them below. This is my first video. I'll try to do things better next time, and let me know on the challenges you face and what we can cover next time. Thank you, and all the best.